Hello there, I'm going to be pretty blunt here. I feel like a lot of people are wrong when they say that this scene here from the Acolyte breaks canon or is not how you bleed a kyber crystal, often pointing to the more explosive bleedings that we see in canon of Vader, Kylo Ren, Dagan Gera. But as far as I can see, this is in line with everything we've seen about bleeding kyber crystals. And as for the argument of, well, she shouldn't be able to do it accidentally and stuff like that, we'll get to all of that as well. And this is actually my second time shooting this video because I put up on my TikTok last week about how this scene didn't break canon, and the comments came out saying that I was wrong. I argued with them, others argued with them, they argued back with me. It was a whole thing. It was very fun. Make sure you follow me over on TikTok if you want to get in on that. So I wanted to grab some of those comments and incorporate them into this video because it's a lot easier for me to say, well, people said this, and then have an example of people saying that, sort of something that I can directly respond to. So let's talk about it. As of right now, we have had kyber crystal bleeding 5 times. We've been present for it 5 times, I think, in new canon. Now, in the EU, bleeding kyber crystals wasn't a thing. This is a Disney edition. The red crystals in the EU were all synthetic. In canon, kyber crystals are all naturally attuned to the light side of the Force, so bleeding them is the process of corrupting them, turning them that blood red color, done so by pouring your anger, your hatred, your pain, your negative emotion into it. But what are the requirements to bleeding a kyber crystal? Now, nothing's been set in stone, but when we look at the 5 canon bleedings that we have, we can nail down that there's pretty much 2 things that you need to successfully bleed a crystal. The first one is that the person needs their emotions. Anger, hatred, pain, rage, fear. It's dealer's choice, really. Those emotions need to pour into the crystal, and this is what's going to corrupt it and turn it red. The second is that the crystal has to be exposed. Now, originally I would have said that there needs to be physical contact with the crystal, but 1, maybe 2, it's not quite clear. Other bleedings show us that it's not exactly required, but the exposure of the crystal is consistent over the 5 bleedings that we've seen, so I'm going to say that it just needs to be exposed. Now, first look at kyber crystal bleeding comes from Darth Vader himself in the 2017 run of the same name in issue number 5. After defeating the Jedi Kirik and Filler and taking his lightsaber for his own, Vader bends the crystal to his will, experiencing visions of his past like Padme, Obi-Wan, his mother, and with a lot of difficulty and effort, he does eventually bleed the crystal. Now, this is the part where people chime in with, but how did Vader struggle so much when someone like Osha didn't? Vader is so much more powerful than Osha, so why is there this struggle here but no struggle there? What's the go? It's a pretty simple thing, really. Bleeding is not a uniform experience for everyone. Everyone is different, and something that is going to contribute greatly to the bleeding experience is the emotional state of the person doing the bleeding. Now, at this point in time, Vader is still holding on to the past, whether that be consciously or unconsciously, I'm not sure, but he is still thinking that maybe he could do things right for a moment. And we see this play out in this comic on the pages previous, where in a vision, Vader doesn't bleed the crystal. He goes to the Emperor and kills him. He goes and finds Obi-Wan, all regretful. But Vader decides against that and draws upon a massive amount of dark side energy to give him the push that he needs, because he is still that little bit conflicted. He needs to convince himself that this is the correct path forward. And so we get this very theatrical, very violent and explosive bleeding of the crystal sequence. Now, Vader is a sledgehammer. He is always going to be a sledgehammer every time, even in the times where a chisel might be more appropriate. Kylo Ren went through something similar, still holding on to the past. He struggled so much that he cracked his crystal, requiring the unique lightsaber hilt design just to make sure the damn thing doesn't collapse and explode in his hand. So we can see that the emotional state of the user is very important when we look at someone like Dagan Gera as well from Jedi Survivor. Now, Dagan, comparatively to Kylo Ren and Vader, has a very easy time bleeding his crystal because he has no conflict within him. He believes himself abandoned and discarded by the Jedi Council in that moment. There is no hesitation, no dwelling on the past. He is committed and he bleeds the crystal with ease. He holds the crystal via the Force, not with physical contact, so this is where the no physical contact need rule sort of came to be, at least in my opinion. But the crystal was still exposed, so it does keep in line with what we know. Now, one of the commenters on TikTok took serious issue with this line of thinking, saying that the requirements of bleeding a crystal need to be pretty much exactly what Vader went through. He quotes Palpatine from that same comic run and says that Osha just didn't do that, hence it breaks canon. But let's break it down. This whole thing here, you know, getting a crystal, going to somewhere dark side in the Force and teaching it your pain and anger and all that, it's a Sith ritual. It's the Sith ritual part of bleeding a crystal. It is ceremonial in a way, ritualistic, but not a requirement. In the canon reference book about lightsabers, it states that some Sith believe this is the only way that you should bleed a crystal, through this sort of ritual, taking the weapon of a Jedi that you've bested in combat, going to somewhere steeped in the dark side of the Force. But again, this is ceremonial, it's set dressing, it's ritualistic, but it's not actually required. Think of it like a graduation ceremony. You can go to your graduation, you can put on the fancy gown and the cap, you can go up on stage, you shake hands and you get given your diploma, and you've graduated. But you can actually just not attend that ceremony and your diploma is still going to arrive in the mail. Either way, you've still graduated because you've met all the requirements. Now, the commenter was adamant that this was a requirement, and also used Kylo Ren's bleeding to support his argument, which doesn't quite work because Kylo Ren bled his crystal on a ship in the middle of space somewhere. He didn't go somewhere steeped in the dark side of the Force, so the argument kind of falls apart that it's a requirement. It is just a Sith ritual that some Sith take part in. They don't all believe this. It's just that Palpatine obviously was like, hey, this is the sort of ritual ceremony that we're going to do for you because you need this to sort of get you on the right path here. The second thing that they really hit home on was that it takes conscious effort. It's not something that can be done by accident or unconsciously, because everyone else beforehand did it on purpose. Now, nowhere in the text of comics, movies, reference books, what have you, does it say that it can't be done accidentally. Now, to be fair, nowhere does it say that it can be done accidentally. So we sort of have to fill in the gaps ourselves here. But what we get here is a case of misinterpreting data. Now, have you heard of the survivorship bias thing? You know, it's the famous example of the World War II planes that have all the bullet holes. It comes back from a fight and the mechanics say, okay, well, we need to put more armor on these things. Where are we going to put the armor? And they decide to put it on the places that are most heavily damaged because that's where all the bullet holes are. So that's where they need to armor and reinforce it, right? But they're wrong. They are misinterpreting the data. This is the plane that took damage in those spots and was still able to return to base. So they actually need to put armor on the spots where the bullet holes aren't, because the planes that took damage in those spots didn't return. I'm just showing how easy it is to misinterpret data. You look at something and you can draw the wrong conclusion even when everything is staring you in the face. It's incredibly easy to misinterpret data and draw the wrong conclusion as well, so I don't really hold that against anyone. But because every attempt they've seen of bleeding beforehand was a deliberate one, they get the wrong idea in their head that it can only ever be done deliberately, and that's not the case. Let me put it to you another way. Many of us had only ever seen single-bladed lightsabers for many, many years. You could be forgiven for thinking that this is the only way that lightsabers could be. They can only ever be single-bladed because everything you've seen beforehand has only ever been single-bladed. But then 1999 comes around and we see a double-bladed lightsaber on screen for the very first time, and this was a lot of people's first exposure to a double-bladed lightsaber. Or maybe you were like me and read Tales of the Jedi back in 1995 and saw Exar Kun with his double-bladed lightsaber there. It's really fun. You should go back and read that stuff if you can. My point is, seeing a new concept, a new take on a pre-existing idea doesn't break the original idea. It's simply an expansion, an evolution of it. So if you think that this scene here breaks canon because it's different to what we've seen beforehand, then you must also say that this scene here, or this comic panel, also breaks canon because we hadn't seen it done this way before either. Now, another frequent comment that was made was that if Osha could accidentally bleed the crystal in the lightsaber, then why didn't Anakin's bleed? During Revenge of the Sith, during Order 66, slaughtering Jedi and younglings in the temple, or during his fight with Obi-Wan? For the simple answer, bleeding wasn't around then. Kyber crystal bleeding is a Disney addition to the lore, and one that I actually quite like, actually. So the boring answer is just that it didn't exist. That's why. Luke gets a blue lightsaber in A New Hope, so the saber needs to stay blue. The in-universe answer, though, is actually just as simple and boring. Remember the two requirements of bleeding a kyber crystal? Pouring of all the emotions into an exposed crystal. Anakin's crystal was not exposed. It's a very simple, mundane, boring answer. So we've talked a little bit about Vader's bleeding, Kylo Ren's bleeding, and Dagan Gera's. Let's jump to a new one that we see briefly in the High Republic novels. Spoilers for Trials of the Jedi. It's a newer book, I only finished it recently, so I'm giving it a spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. Towards the end of the novel, the fallen Jedi Aslan Rel escapes and heads out on his own into the galaxy after finding the old ship of a Jedi with a lightsaber still inside. side. Now, Aslan Rel was a Jedi when he was young, but an encounter with the Nameless, creatures that feed off of the Force itself, and it renders Jedi into empty husks of stone that crumble apart. Aslan was sent insane by this because he witnessed it firsthand, and the presence of the Nameless blinds the Jedi in complete fear. I'll read you a little excerpt from this section of the book. Again, spoilers here. A small crystal caught the light, and Aslan carefully removed it from the lightsaber's hilt, so it's exposed. He held it up, looking at it, seeing the strange sort of spirit it had. It was not alive, but it was certainly not dead. Its energies bent away from him, as if it knew what he was about to do, as if it was afraid. Do it, he thought. Skip ahead, he remembered how he hated himself for the inability to resist or fight back. He felt shame, pain. He remembered the feeling of his thumbs pressing into his eye sockets and pushing, of gouging, of the sharp, ragged edges of his nails puncturing, hoping for relief, and then understanding that mutilating himself had achieved nothing at all. The long walk of years existing, hating, pain, pain, pain. In Aslan's sight, the little kyber crystal screamed. It screamed without sound, and his strange new sight, he saw its aura twist, compress, writhe, and burn. His hands moved quickly again, reassembling the lightsaber, adjusting and modifying, already making the weapon into something that was his, no longer the weapon of a Jedi. Aslan Rel ignited the lightsaber, and a smooth blade emerged from the hilt. He could not see its true color, but he knew it was red. No grand explosion, just drawing on pain and fear from his past and successfully bleeding the crystal red. Now, the people that pointed out that the Vader bleeding process from the 2017 run, that's how it should be done. The same person that wrote the Vader thing and this book, same person, Charles Soule. Two separate bleeding events, both carried out differently, but the same markers are there. The exposed kyber crystal, the pouring of emotion into it. Same writer, so I don't know why one would be accepted and the other one wouldn't. So there is that. Now, finally, we get to Osha in the Acolyte. As a refresher, let's just remember, again, the requirements that needed to be met: an exposed kyber crystal and the negative emotion pouring into said crystal. It does not need to be deliberate effort. Again, you can accidentally do something. Just because people have deliberately done it doesn't mean it can't be done accidentally. We've seen people use the Force without knowing it. Do you think Anakin was the only human pod racer as a 9 or 10-year-old? Think of the kyber crystal as a sponge. That negative emotion pours off a person into it. Also, one commenter didn't quite know what the word exposed means and answered like Kronk for some reason when I said that the crystal was in fact exposed. Side note, I asked several more times if they knew what the word meant, and they dodged answering every single time, so do with that information what you will. Now, what's happening when the crystal begins bleeding in this scene? Does anyone remember what is actually happening? I'll give you a hint. Osha is murdering Soul. Osha is killing someone with the Force. Force choke, in fact. I'm going to say that that would probably fall under a dark side ability. So she is literally murdering someone with the Force, the person who has been lying to her for years, the person who killed her mother, the person who is responsible, directly or indirectly, depending on how you want to look at it, for everything that has gone wrong with her life. There is a great amount of anger and betrayal happening here, and that's when we see the crystal begin to change. A lot of people said it happened instantaneously. I don't know what show you were watching. It did not happen like that. Maybe stop, watching the show and looking at your phone at the same time, or maybe stop getting all your opinions from YouTubers secondhand. I don't know, but it didn't happen instantaneously. It was a small, gradual thing. One thing that someone asked was, why wasn't there an explosion, the big explosive type thing when the crystal bled, because it had happened with 3 other bleedings. Why wasn't it here? My theory was just because the crystal was still inside the hilt of the lightsaber and still connected to all these parts whose sole purpose is to focus and contain that energy and put it into a beam. And I'm going to say that it being in the hilt contained that explosion, I guess. That's just my simple theory, but as we just read with the Aslan Rel one, there didn't seem to be any big explosion there, and the crystal was completely exposed there. Again, maybe it just comes down to the user and just how much effort they are putting into it. I'm not sure. This part, honestly, still open for debate. Other criticisms I've seen of this was that she wasn't angry enough, she wasn't screaming, or she wasn't in pain. Pain is not only physical, emotional pain is also a thing. Have you ever been so angry that you were just like seething in silent rage? No? Okay, well, life must be very nice for you then. But it is possible. People don't always express in grand theatrical ways how they're feeling. Vader didn't originally say no during this scene. We could understand what he was thinking, what he was feeling here, without any words. Now, George Lucas inevitably didn't think so and added in the no later on, but it is possible to get across how someone is thinking and feeling through body language. I've seen other people say that it just wasn't a very exciting bleeding scene compared to the others, and that's why they don't like it, and in all honesty, fair game. If that's why you didn't like it, I'm not going to argue against that. It is a lot more subdued and subtle. I think that that fits quite well with Osha and her character in this moment though. If you did want it to be more explosive, expressive, and aggressive, I'm not going to fault you for that. I think that is a fair criticism. But at the end of the day, this scene doesn't break canon. It doesn't get anything wrong about kyber crystals or lightsabers or bleeding or the Force. I enjoyed The Acolyte. It was a very flawed show. But honestly, some people really just hit at this show with anything and everything, even when they had no basis or leg to stand on. I don't think the scene breaks canon. I've explained why I think it fits into the previous bleedings we've seen beforehand with evidence provided, but I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? All right, that's gonna do it for me. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, make sure you follow me here and over on TikTok. I love talking about Star Wars. Again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. May the Force be with you, always.